wow is the best way to describe it.
It's amazing, the power, the magnitude, the force.
Inside a hangar at Florida International University, 12 giant fans create the wall of wind. A hurricane simulator designed to put building codes and supplies to the test. 25 years ago, the wall of wind didn't exist. Now, researchers are able to simulate hurricane-like conditions within these 4 walls and use models like this to show how those conditions could affect things like walls and windows in actual buildings.
And you get a little taste of what a Category 5 hurricane is and can be. And it does give you that respect that, boy, those things are powerful and they can do a lot of damage.
It's a lot more than just a wind tunnel.
The fans bring the air in from that end, and then they contract that flow of air so it speeds up. That's what got us the speed.
Triangles on the ground mimic buildings in the hurricane's path.
So we got the speed, we got the personality, and when it hits that structure, it's as close to Mother Nature as we can get.
The goal is to see if building codes implemented since Hurricane Andrew can withstand nature's force. In this test, the advances of the tougher post-Andrew code seemed pretty clear.
The newer buildings did pretty well.
Since Andrew, the government's learned a lot about how to prepare and respond to hurricanes too.
Well, research gets transferred into operations. So without research, we wouldn't change the way we do things. And with the research, our track forecasts for hurricanes are so much better.
Using new tools, this graphic shows how they might have been able to better predict Hurricane Andrew's path today.
Now the research now is all focused on intensity.
To foresee the kind of rapid strengthening Andrew went through. Back at the wall of wind,
We here, we're trying to make an impact so that folks can be in a safer place. Heaven forbid a big storm comes our way again.
they're hoping to save property and lives. In Miami, Lori Davison, Bay News 9.
Ladies and gentlemen, tickets here, guys, for our next sponge boat ride.
Taking a tour of Tarpon Springs
Folks interested in a boat ride today?
is like visiting Greece
Anybody want to go sponge boat ride? Have a boat going out.
without ever leaving Florida. A mix of the showy and the cultural.
Whoopa!
A place where you can climb on a boat
Welcome aboard.
and soak up history in a city known as the sponge capital of the world. It's an industry dominated by the Greeks here. But dive in deeper and you'll find African Americans were among the first spongers in the region. They were called hookers for the techniques they used.
What they did in the early days before the Greeks came, sponges were harvested entirely by hooking them with a long hook from dinghies.
The city's curator of arts and historical resources, Tina Bukovalis, says in the early 1900s, Greek immigrants arrived in waves. Using diving methods, they were able to harvest 5 times as many sponges, eventually taking over the docks.
Many in the African American community went to work on their boats, often as crew members, engineers, cooks, but some as divers as well.
These are people that I knew personally.
Alfred Quarterman remembers it all. Walking through Rose Cemetery, he points out dozens of graves that belonged to blacks who worked in the sponge trade, including his father and uncle.
And believe it or not, they both spoke Greek fluently. Because after all, if you're on a boat for 2 months or so back there, you better understand something that's going on.
Alfred recalls a closeness between the two communities.
I have never had a problem with Greeks because when my father went out on the boat, it was not unusual for the families to invite me over to their house. That's when I learned about goat cheese, feta they call it, and spaghetti, and Greek candy.
Most of the African American spongers are gone now, their contributions marked in gravestones at the cemetery. but Alfred is keeping track.
Thomas Stout, Florida. Reuben Smith, Bahamas. Thomas Knowles, Florida. John Johnson, Johnny Johnson, Frank Fisher.
He worries about their impact being forgotten.
And you'd hate to see anybody that lose their identity because nobody thought about them anymore.
So he's working to have the cemetery designated as a National Historical Site.
And when I see the history of my father and my uncle, I'm very proud of that, and I love it.
The pioneering spirit of those early spongers still living on in people's hearts and minds on the docks to this day. In Tarpon Springs, Lori Davison, Bay News 9.
Yeah, baby!
South Florida has a vibe all its own.
Laid back.
Amazing. Fantastic.
The weather is warm.
Fun in the sun.
The water is clear.
The ocean's as blue as you can imagine.
And the beaches are full.
Yeah, baby! Super happy. No worries in the world.
But 25 years ago, an unwelcome guest named Hurricane Andrew crashed the party.
Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard.
Bill Zinn and his wife Sandy look back on August 24th, 1992 with a mixture of pride and pain.
I don't think I ever cried as much as I did following this storm.
The couple was at home with their children when Hurricane Andrew hit. As the family huddled under a mattress, their son Ian rolled on a tape recorder in his pocket.
Holy shit! The roof just came off.
All right.
Okay.
It's all right. We're underneath the mattress. We're fine.
When we crawled out of the mattress, it's kind of a blur, really. We just kind of wandered around, I guess, more or less in a fog.
Realizing their home was gone.
It's hard to go through to see everything you own basically destroyed.
There are still remnants of Hurricane Andrew here in the Zinn's neighborhood, like this concrete slab that sits where a house once stood right next door.
You just deal with it. You just move on.
For the Zinns, moving on didn't mean moving away. Instead, they rebuilt on the exact same spot.
It's nice to see, you know, what we got now versus where we were. These are all pictures from Andrew.
The new house even includes a wall of remembrance dedicated to the storm.
We stuck together and we made it.
Just as the Zinns survived, so did South Florida, giving them reason to celebrate a community even stronger than before. In Miami-Dade County, Lori Davison, Bay News 9.